My husband told me I was half a woman, the same day he signed our divorce papers, and he smiled when the judge ended 12 years of our marriage, like he'd finally been set free. Tell me something. How do you walk out of a courthouse with no husband, no home, no children, and still convince yourself your life matters? I couldn't not that day. My name is Vanessa. I was 30 and for over a decade, my whole identity was wrapped around two pink lines that never showed up. You know what I mean, right? When everything in your life shrinks down to this one thing you can't control, and people start treating you like a broken appliance instead of a person. 12 years of fertility treatments, doctor appointments, charts, injections, waiting rooms full of pregnant women looking at me with pity, and every single negative test made my husband, Derek's face a little colder, a little less patient, a little more ashamed of me. His mother was worse. At family dinners, she'd say things like, "Some women just aren't meant to be mothers," or, "At least my son gave you a good life, even if you couldn't give him a child." And she'd say it with this soft, fake concern that felt sharper than a slap. After a while, you hear the same thing over and over. Barren, useless, broken. And it starts to sound like the truth. So when the judge stamped the divorce papers, and Derek shook my hand, like we'd just finished a business deal, I was already halfway hollow. Out on the courthouse steps, he looked at me. This woman he'd promised to love forever, and said, "You're free now, Vanessa. You can stop pretending you're enough." And then he walked away, lighter, relieved, not even turning back once. Yeah, that happened. I didn't scream. I didn't chase him. I just walked carrying 2 suitcases and a heart that felt like shattered glass. I dropped those suitcases at a women's shelter on 5th Street, the kind place where everything smells like disinfectant and despair, but the staff talks to you like you're still human. And then I wandered into the park across the street because I had nowhere else to go. It was December. The kind of cold that feels personal, like the wind has a grudge. I sat down on this metal bench, and it was so cold it burned straight through my thin coat. But I didn't move. My phone was dead. The apartment wasn't mine anymore. My marriage was gone. My bank account. Let's just say it was not in good shape. I sat there, replaying every word Derek and his mother had ever used on me. Barren, worthless half a woman. Letting those words circle my mind like vultures. I remember looking around that park thinking, this is it. This is what the end of a life looks like. Not a big accident, not some dramatic movie scene. Just a girl on a frozen bench with nothing left. And for a while, I just existed there. And then I heard it, crying. Little kids crying. Not just one voice, several. That sound snapped me out of my fog quicker than any self-help book could have. I looked up and saw them by the fountain, 4 kids huddled together, maybe 30 feet away. They were wearing those expensive coats with real down filling the kind rich parents buy, so they can feel better about living in cold states. But the kids were still shivering, cheeks red from wind and tears. The smallest boy was sobbing. The oldest boy had his arms around the others, trying to hold it together, but his eyes were full of panic, and there were twin girls standing between them, wide-eyed and scared. Next to them stood this tall man in a nice business suit that was damp from the fountain mist air, messy tie loose, talking into his phone with a voice that sounded like it was about to crack. We're by a fountain, but there's 3 fountains. The GPS cut out. The little one is freezing. I don't know which exit to take. I can't mess this up. I can't lose them too. And those 3 words, lose them too, hit me like a punch. I didn't think. I just stood up and walked toward them. "Excuse me," I said. When I got close enough, my voice coming out soft. even though my heart was hammering. "Are you lost?" The man spun around, eyes red and exhausted. Phone still pressed to his ear. Up close, he looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in years, not days. "Yes, I'm trying to find the north parking lot, but we got turned around. The GPS stopped working and..." He trailed off, looking completely overwhelmed. The oldest boy jumped in. "Dad said the car was near the fountain, but there's 3 fountains, and we've been walking for like an hour, and Trevor is cold. And..." The smallest boy hiccuped and cried harder, so I did what felt natural. I knelt down so I was eye level with the kids and said, "Hey, it's okay. You're not alone. We're going to figure this out all right." My voice went into that calm, gentle tone I used to use when I volunteered in the church nursery, back when I still believed I might be a mom someday. I looked up at the man. "You said north parking lot, right? I come here sometimes. I know where it is. If we cut through that path and go past the statue, it's about 10 minutes. He stared at me like I'd just pulled a miracle out of thin air. "You'd do that?" he asked. Before I could answer, one of the twins whispered to the other dad. "She's nice," and her sister nodded. "Very nice." Something in my chest loosened. "Of course," I said. "Come on. Stay close together. We'll get you warm soon." We walked in a little crooked line, the kids in the middle holding hands, me on one side, the man on the other. He finally hung up his phone. "I'm Brandon, by the way," he said quietly, like he was afraid to talk too loud and break something fragile. "Brandon Foster. These are my kids. Caleb, my oldest. The twins, Nadia and Natalie, and Trevor, the little guy." I smiled at each of them and told them my name. "I'm Vanessa." And the twins immediately tested it out, Vanessa. That's pretty. It sounds like a princess name, and I laughed for the first time that whole day. We made it to the north parking lot in about 10 minutes, just like I'd said. His black SUV was sitting right there in the spot he'd been looking for. He unlocked it with shaking hands, and the kids dove inside, buckling up, with this huge rush of relief on their faces. Brandon turned to me. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "Can I pay you? Or at least give you a ride somewhere?" I shook my head. "You don't have to pay me," I said. "I'm just glad I could help." "Please," he said, glancing at my thin coat and the darkening sky. "It's freezing." "Where are you headed?" I hesitated. I didn't want to say back to the shelter. I didn't want to watch his eyes change from gratitude to pity. So I said Rosie's Diner on 5th Street. It was near the shelter anyway. "Get in," he said. It was already decided. The car was warm and smelled like leather and crayons. Trevor fell asleep mid-sniffle, thumb drifting toward his mouth. The twins murmured quietly to each other. Caleb stared out the window, watching the lights go by, like he was trying to control the whole world with his eyes. We drove in silence for a minute. Then Brandon said, "Dead day." I gave a dry little laugh. "You could say that. My husband divorced me this morning. 12 years gone with one signature." He glanced at me, and I saw real sympathy there, not the kind people spray around to make themselves feel better. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. "Rough day here, too. Today's the anniversary of my wife's death. 2 years. Oh, there it was. The lose them, too. I thought taking the kids to the park would be a nice way to honor her." He went on, but the closer we got to her favorite spot, the more I just froze, and then I lost. The car got turned around. The GPS died. And suddenly, I felt like I was failing all of them all over again. There are moments where 2 completely different lives just overlap. Sitting in that warm SUV with a man I'd met 20 minutes earlier, and 4 kids still smelling like cold air and tears, I felt it. My marriage had just ended because I couldn't give someone a family, and this man was drowning because he was trying to hold his family together without their mother. When we pulled up outside Rosie's diner, I opened the door. The cold slapped me again, and I started to step out. "Wait," Brandon said. He took a business card out of his wallet and held it out. "If you ever need anything at all, call me, please." I took it, stuck it in my coat pocket, said, "Thank you," and walked away back toward the shelter and the bunk bed and the locker with my whole life in it. That night, lying in that narrow shelter bed, I pulled out that card and stared at his name, Brandon Foster, and the company under it, Foster Tech. I had no idea who he really was. No idea that card was going to change my life. At that point, all I knew was that for 2 hours in a freezing park, I had been needed, and it felt like oxygen. The shelter gave me 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find a job, figure out housing, rebuild a life from scratch. I walked around the city with my cheap black flats rubbing blisters into my heels, handing out resumes at grocery stores, coffee shops, cleaning agencies, anywhere that had a help wanted sign. That 12-year gap on my resume, homemaker, might as well have been a skull and crossbones. No one called. On the 4th day, I walked into Rosie's diner and asked if they were hiring. The owner, Rita, looked me up and down, asked if I could start immediately. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Minimum wage plus tips. Blue uniform with a white apron. Nothing fancy. But it was a chance. My first shift. My feet were screaming by hour 3. My back was on fire by hour 5. But there was this strange comfort in wiping tables and refilling coffee cups. I felt useful. I could do this. I was good at smiling and listening and saying, "How's your day going?" like I meant it, because I did. People came and went. Some were rude, some were kind, most barely noticed me. Then, around 3 in the afternoon, during that quiet dip between lunch and dinner, the bell over the door chimed. I turned around, dishcloth in my hand, and my heart dropped right through the floor. Brandon. In a crisp suit this time, hair combed, looking a little less like a man about to fall apart. And all 4 kids were with him. Vanessa Trevor yelled when he saw me, and before I could react, he sprinted across the diner and slammed into me, arms wrapping around my waist like I was a life raft. The twins were right behind him, grabbing onto my hands. Even Caleb had this small, soft smile that looked like it hadn't appeared in a long time. "What are you all doing here?" I asked, completely overwhelmed. Brandon walked up slower than the kids and said, "We've been looking for you." "For 3 days," Caleb added. "We checked every diner in the city," Nadia said proudly. "Because you were nice," Natalie finished, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I felt tears sting my eyes. "You looked for me," I said. Brandon gestured to a big corner booth. "Can we sit? I know you're working, but if your boss will let you take a break, I just need a few minutes." I glanced at Rita, and she gave me this little nod, like go. So we all piled into the booth, the kids on one side, Brandon across from me. I was still holding my order pad, out of habit. "What can I get you?" I asked. Brandon shook his head. "Your time," he said, "just your time. 5 minutes. Please, sit." Trevor climbed straight into my lap, like it was his reserved seat. I didn't move him. Brandon took a deep breath, the kind you take before you jump off a cliff. "I'm going to be direct," he said. "My wife died of cancer 2 years ago. Since then, I've hired 6 nannies. They all quit. My kids are grieving, angry, scared. They test every adult who walks through that door to see who will leave this time. I run a tech company, so I work long hours, and I feel like I'm failing them at home, and barely holding it together at work. He looked at the kids, then at me. But that night in the park, when I was completely useless, you stepped in. You were calm. You were kind. They felt safe with you. I haven't seen them relax like that in a long time. You didn't ask for anything. You just helped. He swallowed. I don't just need a nanny Vanessa. I need someone with a good heart who sees my kids as people, not a paycheck. So, I'd like to offer you a job. Pattern interrupt. I thought he wanted to pay my diner bill. Instead, he said, live-in nanny. You'd move into the house, have your own room and bathroom, full benefits, and a salary of $80,000 a year. I just stared at him. $80,000. I had $17 in my checking account. I was sleeping in a shelter. My entire life fit into 2 suitcases, and this man was offering me more stability in 1 sentence than I'd had in over a decade. I can't accept that, I whispered. Why not, he asked, genuinely confused. Because it's too much, I said. I don't have certifications. I've never been a professional nanny. I've been out of the workforce for 12 years. I'm divorced. I'm living in a shelter. There are 100 people more qualified than me. He shook his head. Maybe on paper, he said, but paperwork isn't what my kids need. You have something better. You have a heart they trust. That's worth more than any certificate. Please stay with us, Trevor said on my lap, looking up with those big, hopeful eyes. We'll be good, Nadia promised. Mostly good, Natalie corrected. Caleb didn't say anything, but his gaze said everything. So let me ask you, if it were you, sitting there with sore feet, a tiny paycheck, no home, and 4 kids practically begging you to be part of their lives, and this man offering you safety and a second chance, what would you have done? I said yes. 3 hours later, I walked through the front door of the Foster estate, with my 2 suitcases, still wondering if I was out of my mind. The house was huge. Glass walls, high ceilings, a long staircase, artwork that definitely didn't come from a discount store. My room was upstairs, right next to the kids' rooms, with a real bed, a private bathroom, and a window overlooking a garden that looked like something out of a magazine. Is this really mine? I asked Brandon. All yours, he said. Dinner's at 6. We usually just order pizza. I can cook, I said before I could stop myself. If that's okay. He looked genuinely surprised. You cook? I like to. I shrugged. Then, yes, please, he said. The kids will love it. That night, I made spaghetti and garlic bread with the limited ingredients I found in the pantry. Simple, but real. The kids devoured it like they hadn't had a home-cooked meal in months. Brandon kept looking between them and me, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. After dinner, while I was washing dishes, Trevor came up beside me, dragging his little fingers along the counter. Are you going to leave? He asked. Voice tiny, I dried my hands, knelt down, and said, No, sweetheart. I'm going to stay. Promise, I promise. He threw his arms around my neck and squeezed. I went to bed that night exhausted and terrified. But for the first time in a long time, a tiny part of me felt like it had a purpose. The first full morning in that house started at 6 a.m., when Trevor climbed into my bed just to make sure I was still there. You didn't leave, he whispered. I told you I wouldn't, I said. At 7, the twins burst through my door, arguing about who got to sit by me at breakfast. Dad already left for work, Natalie reported. Caleb's still in bed, Nadia added. School started at 8:30. We had an hour and a half to get 4 kids dressed, fed, organized, and out the door. The last nanny had apparently just poured dry cereal in bowls and scrolled her phone. I decided to go all in. Pancakes with chocolate chips. The twins looked at me like I'd just announced Christmas came twice that year. Trevor's eyes went wide. With syrup? Of course, I said. And maybe some fruit so your dad doesn't think I'm trying to get you on a sugar-only diet. Caleb came down last, hair messy, clothes wrinkled, trying to act like he didn't care. "You don't have to cook for us," he muttered. But he sat down and ate 3 pancakes in silence. We got everyone out the door, backpacks, packed lunches, made shoes found under couches and behind doors. I walked them to the end of the long driveway, waited until they got on the bus, and waved as they pressed their faces to the windows. Then the bus disappeared. The house went silent, and I was alone with this enormous, echoing space. I cleaned not because the house was dirty, but because I needed something to do with my hands. In the living room, I found a row of framed photos on a shelf. Brandon and a beautiful woman, with warm eyes and curly hair, holding babies, blowing out birthday candles, smiling at each other in the sun. Then one photo, where she looked thinner, paler. Then photos with just Brandon and the kids' no more wife. Lauren, the ghost in every corner of the house. I picked up one of the frames, tracing her face with my finger, like she could feel it. "I'm not trying to replace you," I whispered. "I just want to help your babies. You ever walk into a place and just feel the weight of the missing person? That was this house. And Brandon. Even with me, there was half missing too. He'd leave early, come home late, always apologizing. Always just one more meeting, just one more call. He'd sit at the table with us when he could, but even then, his mind was clearly somewhere else, buried under numbers and deals. The kids watched him like he was a TV show they were scared would get canceled. After dinner, they'd drift upstairs, and he'd disappear into his office. After a couple weeks of that, something in me snapped again. One night after I put the kids to bed, I knocked on his office door. He was on a video call, face tight, shoulders hunched, talking about projections and board expectations. I waited until he hung up. "Come in," he said, sounding exhausted. I stepped inside. "The kids keep asking what time you'll be home," I said. "I know." He sighed. "I just have to finish this report." I took a breath. "Brandon, they don't just need your paycheck. They need you. Not the leftovers at the end of a long day. You're giving all your best energy to your company and whatever's left to your kids." "That's not fair," he said. "I'm doing the best I can." "I believe you," I said. "But sometimes doing your best still hurts the people you love if your priorities are upside down. You say you're working for them, but right now what they want most is time, not money." I pointed toward the stairs. "Caleb barely talks at dinner. The twins keep trying to make you laugh, and when you don't, they pretend they don't care. Trevor asks me every night what time Daddy is coming home. You're there, but you're not really there." He looked like I'd slapped him, but he didn't argue. "I don't know how to do this without Lauren," he finally said. She was the heart. I was the provider. I don't know how to be both. "You don't have to be perfect," I said. "You just have to show up. Start small. One bedtime story, one real conversation. One evening where you're fully present, phone off, laptop closed." That night, he did it. He went into Trevor's room first, sat on the edge of the bed with a picture book, and stumbled through the story like a guy learning a new language. Trevor fell asleep against his chest halfway through. I watched from the doorway as Brandon looked down at his son and whispered, "When did you get so big?" Then we went to the twins' room where he sat on the floor between their beds and said, "Tell me everything about your day," and actually listened, laughingly acting. He apologized for not being around and told them they were more important than any meeting. Last we went to Caleb's room. He was reading, but his eyes weren't moving. "Can we talk?" Brandon asked. Caleb shrugged, but he closed the book. Brandon sat down and asked him about a book report, and somehow that turned into a conversation about grief. about how Caleb was angry and sad and felt alone, about how Brandon had been so wrapped up in his own pain that he hadn't seen his sons. They both cried. They both apologized. Little cracks in the grief started to let light back in. Later downstairs, Brandon told me, "You've done more in 2 days than I've managed in 2 years." I shook my head. "You did it. You just needed someone to give you a push." He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Pain teaches things we never wanted to learn, huh?" And then gently, "What did yours teach you?" So I told him about the accident when I was 19, how my parents went out to pick me up, and I called to say I'd gotten a ride from a friend, and their car never made it home. I told him about the guilt that wrapped around my ribs like barbed wire. I told him about sitting in empty doctor offices at 23 being told my body didn't work the way it was supposed to, about Derek pulling away from me one cold comment at a time, and how after a few years he wasn't just disappointed, he was disgusted. Brandon listened, then said he was wrong. About all of it. "You are not broken. I see the way my kids light up when you walk into a room. That's not something a broken person does to people." I wanted to believe him so badly, but it takes time to unlearn a lie you lived in for 12 years. Now up to this point, you might think you know where the story is going. Sad divorced woman becomes magical nanny, heals grieving family, slowly finds love. A classic Hallmark arc, right? But here comes the twist that flipped everything on its head. It was a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen making waffles. The kids were in the living room watching cartoons. Brandon was upstairs, enjoying a rare, lazy morning. The doorbell rang. I dried my hands, walked to the door, and looked through the frosted glass. Derek! My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I had to grab the doorknob to steady myself. He looked exactly the same. Expensive coat hair starting to go gray at the temples in that distinguished way. Same cold eyes scanning everything like he owned it. I opened the door, just a crack. "Vanessa," he said, smiling like we hadn't seen each other in years, like he hadn't called me half a woman to my face. "You're hard to track down." "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Can I come in?" he said automatically, already leaning forward like he was going to invite himself. "No," I said. "This isn't my house. I can't invite you in." He looked past me, taking in the big entryway, the polished floors, the framed art on the walls. "I heard you were working as a nanny for some rich guy," he said. "Looks like you landed on your feet. Billionaire?" "Right. Brandon Foster, tech mogul." I looked him up. "What do you want, Derek?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. He sighed like it hurt him to admit it. "I made a mistake," he said. "The divorce. I acted too fast. 12 years together has to mean something. I want you back." If you could have heard the laugh that came out of me, it was ugly. "You're not serious," I said. "I am," he insisted. I know I said things I shouldn't have. I was frustrated, okay? The infertility, the pressure my mother had got to me. But I've had time to think. Maybe kids aren't everything. We could adopt or just focus on us. I just want my wife back. "I'm not your wife," I said. "Not anymore." "Legally sure," he said. "But we can fix this. I miss you. I miss us." "You miss control," I said. "You miss having someone to blame." His face hardened. "That's not fair." "Do you think it was fair to call me worthless for 12 years?" I asked. "To treat me like I failed as a human being because my body couldn't give you what you wanted?" He stepped closer. "We had a good life. I made good money. I gave you a nice home. You're really going to throw that away because I said a few things in anger. You didn't want me when I had nothing." I said, You don't get me now that I'm finally starting to have something again. That's how this works." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "You think this is going to last? This little fantasy, when he finds out you're barren, he'll toss you out just like I did. Then you'll come crawling back." "Who's at the door?" Brandon's voice came from behind me. He walked down the stairs, in jeans and a blue sweater, and feet hair still damp. He came to stand right beside me, not in front of me like I was fragile, but next to me like we were on the same team. "Everything okay?" he asked. Derek's eyes narrowed. "Who are you, Brandon Foster?" he said. "Vanessa's employer." Her husband Derek corrected. "Ex-husband," I said calmly. "I'm here to bring her home," Derek announced, as if this was some grand reunion. Brandon looked at him, then at me. "She is home," he said simply. Right then, 4 little pairs of feet thundered down the hall. The kids had heard voices. Trevor ran straight to me and wrapped himself around my leg. "Who's that?" he asked. "Nobody important," I said, smoothing his hair. The twins flanked me, each holding onto my arms. Caleb stood a little behind, watchful. "These your kids?" Derek asked Brandon, but he was staring at me, surrounded by them. "They are," Brandon said, "and she takes care of them." "She does more than that," Caleb cut in. "She makes us breakfast, helps with homework, reads us stories. She actually cares about us. She's the best," Nadia said. "Way better than the other nannies," Natalie added. Trevor squeezed my leg tighter. "Don't go with him," he whispered. "Stay here." Derek looked from their faces to mine, and for the first time in 12 years, I saw it click. He realized he'd lost me. Completely. "You found your family," he said, voice bitter. "Just not with me." "Not with you," I agreed. He shot one last ugly arrow on his way out. He looked at Brandon and said, "You know she can't have children, right? In case you were thinking of anything long-term." Brandon's jaw clenched. "I know," he said, "and I don't care. She loves my children. They love her. That's all that matters to me." Derek sneered, spat out, "You're all fools," and walked back to his car. No dramatic scene, no final slap. Just a man who walked away from a good woman and discovered too late she didn't need his approval to be whole. Watching his car disappear, my hands were shaking. But for once, it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. From finally saying no to someone who had defined my worth for too long. "Are you okay?" Brandon asked. I realized I had tears on my cheeks. "Yeah," I said, slowly feeling it as I said it. "I think I really am." The kids all looked up at me. "We're glad you said no," Caleb said. "Me too," I said. "Before I tell you how we went from that moment at the door to standing in a garden with a ring on my finger, let me just say this. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind." After the Derek showdown, something shifted. The kids saw me choose them over my past, and their trust in me deepened. Caleb started coming to me more, not just for homework, but to talk. The twins clung a little tighter. Trevor followed me like a shadow, constantly checking that I was still there. One night I heard muffled crying from upstairs. Brandon thought giving space was best, but there's a difference between moody and falling apart. I walked to Caleb's room and knocked. "Can I come in?" "Go away," he said. "I just want to make sure you're okay." Silence. Then quieter. "Fine." He was sitting on his bed with his arms around his knees, staring at a photo of his mom on the nightstand. Tears streaked his face. I sat down beside him, not too close. "Want to talk about it?" I asked. "You'll think I'm terrible," he said. "I won't. You don't know that." "Try me," I said. After a long pause, he choked out, "It's my fault. Mom died." My heart cracked in two. "No, Caleb," I said, "it's not. It is," he insisted. "She was so sick she hurt all the time, and one night I asked God to make it stop. I prayed for it to end, and 2 days later she died. I killed her. I asked for it, and God listened." I pulled him into my arms and let him sob into my shoulder. "Listen to me." That voice firm, even while my eyes burned. "Cancer killed your mom. Not your prayers. Not your love. You weren't praying for her to die. You were praying for her pain to stop. That's compassion. That's love. You were a kid who saw his mom hurting and begged for help the only way he knew how." He pulled back enough to look at me. "You really think so?" he asked. "I know so," I said. "I prayed the same kind of prayers after my parents' accident. It doesn't make us killers. It makes us human." Right then, I heard movement at the door and saw Brandon standing there, eyes shining, hand over his mouth. He came in, knelt on the other side of Caleb, and said, "I prayed for it to end too." Caleb stared at him. Near the end, Brandon went on. "When the pain was unbearable and the doctors had no more options, I prayed for her suffering to stop." "Does that make me a murderer?" Caleb said immediately. "Then why would it make you one?" Brandon asked. "That was the night we started sharing the weight of grief instead of carrying it alone. When Caleb finally fell asleep between us, I started to leave, so father and son could have their space. But Brandon said, 'Stay. Please, you're part of this family too.' Those were words I didn't know how much I needed until I heard them. Later in the hall outside my room, he stopped me. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "these last few months, you changed everything. The kids are laughing again. The house feels alive again. And he paused. "I'm happier than I've been in a long time. Because of you." My heart was in my throat. "I feel the same," I said. "I know this is complicated," he went on. "Legally. You work for me. You live in my house. You're the kid's nanny. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel." And then he just said it straight out. "I'm falling for you." There was no smooth speech, no rom-com perfection, just a man stripping his fear off for a minute. "I'm falling for you too." I admitted, my voice shaking. We decided to move slowly to keep the kids first. But after that night, there was no more pretending it was just employer and employee. And then came the night that sealed everything. It started like any family night. I made tacos. The kids piled them with way too much cheese. Brandon texted that he'd be late, but was trying to get home. We were laughing about something Trevor said, when he suddenly went quiet and put his hand on his stomach. "My tummy hurts," he whispered. At first I thought he just ate too fast, but then his face went pale, like all the color drained out at once. I touched his forehead. Boiling hot. I grabbed the thermometer. 104.2. My heart kicked into emergency gear. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Caleb, call your dad. Tell him Trevor is really sick, and we're going to the hospital. Girls' shoes on sweaters now." I dialed 911 and told them his symptoms. The dispatcher said an ambulance was on its way. I packed a bag with his favorite stuffed animal, a blanket. My phone charger with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The ambulance arrived with lights and sirens. Neighbors peeking out through their curtains. They loaded Trevor onto the gurney and strapped him in. His eyes kept sliding closed. "Vanessa," he mumbled. "Stay." "I'm right here, buddy," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." Caleb, the twins, and a neighbor followed behind us in their car. I rode in the back of the ambulance holding Trevor's hand, while strangers in blue gloves poked him and checked monitors. At the hospital, they rushed him into an exam room. Doctors asked 100 questions. They pressed on his stomach, checked his blood, sent him for scans. Could be appendicitis, one said. We need imaging. I stepped out to call Brandon. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? He asked, voice already tight. Trevor's sick, I said. High fever, stomach pain. We're at Memorial Hospital. They think it might be his appendix. You need to come now. I'm on my way, he said. And hung up. Those next hours felt like a lifetime. The twins curled up in plastic chairs, their little hands clutching mine. Caleb sat, rigid eyes glued to the door. Every time a nurse passed, he flinched. When Brandon came rushing into the waiting area, his tie half undone. Hair, messy, eyes wild. He looked at me like I was the only solid thing in the room. Where is he? What did they say? He asked. They think it's his appendix, I said. They're doing tests, but they're pretty sure. He went pale. Lauren's cancer started with stomach pain, he whispered. This is different, I said. You don't know that he shot back, panic rising. I took his hand. I know your son, and I know this is going to be okay. One crisis at a time, remember. He sank into the chair next to me. I can't lose another person I love, he said. If I lose him, I'll break. I squeezed his hand harder. You won't break, I said. You'll bend. You'll hurt, but you won't break because you're stronger than you think. And this time, you're not alone. The surgeon finally came out. Mr. Foster Brandon jumped up. Your son has acute appendicitis, she said. The appendix is very inflamed, but hasn't ruptured yet. We need to operate right away. It's a routine surgery. We do these all the time. Brandon nodded numbly. They wheeled Trevor past us on a gurney. He was barely awake, but his hand reached out. Vanessa, he slurred. I'm right here, I said, leaning over him. I'll be here when you wake up. I promise. Then the doors swung shut. In the waiting room, the twins eventually cried themselves to sleep on my shoulders. Caleb sat between me and Brandon, staring at the floor, jaw clenched. He's going to be okay. Right? Nadia whispered before she drifted off. Yes, I said. The doctors are very good. What if something goes wrong? Natalie asked. Then we'll deal with it, I said. But we're not going to borrow trouble. We're going to have faith. Brandon looked at me like I was some kind of anchor. I'm terrified, he said quietly. So am I. I admitted. But somebody has to be the calm one, so we can take turns falling apart later. He let out a short, shaky laugh. How did I get so lucky to find you in that park? Maybe we found each other, I said. 2 hours later, the surgeon came back. The surgery went perfectly, she said. His appendix was about to rupture, so you brought him in just in time. He'll need to stay a few days, but he's going to be fine. Brandon's knees buckled. I grabbed his arm to steady him. Tears poured down his face. Thank you, he told her. Thank you so much. When we were allowed to see Trevor, he was small and pale in that big hospital bed, but his breathing was steady. Brandon touched his hair like he was made of glass. He's okay, he whispered. He's okay, I echoed. Then he turned to me, stepped forward, and pulled me into his arms with this raw, shaking relief. I held him while his whole body trembled. If you hadn't been there, he said into my shoulder. If you hadn't seen how sick he was, if you hadn't called the ambulance. But I was there, I said. And I did. Because I love him. He pulled back enough to look me in the eyes. You love him like a mother loves her child, he said. Tears filled my eyes. Do. I whispered. I love all of them. I know you do, he said. And they love you. And Vanessa, I love you too. My breath caught. "What, I love you?" he repeated, really looking at me. I've probably loved you since that night in the park, but I was too scared to say it. Life is too short to pretend we don't feel what we feel. Lauren taught me that. Tonight hammered it in. He took a shaky breath. "You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." But I wanted to say it back. "I love you too," I said. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. I thought I was too broken, too used up. But you and those kids, you put me back together. His face softened in this way I will never forget. He cupped my face in his hands. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Here now." "Here now," he said, "because life is short, and I don't want to waste another second." So I nodded, and he kissed me gentle and sure in a quiet hospital hallway, while our son, yes, I said our son in my heart, slept on the other side of the wall. Trevor woke up the next morning groggy, blinking into the bright light. The first person he saw was me. "You stayed," he mumbled. "I promised, didn't I?" I said. "Love you," he whispered, then drifted back to sleep. Brandon took my hand and squeezed. In that moment, whatever lines there had been between nanny and family just dissolved. When Trevor came home, he milked that surgery for everything it was worth. "Caleb, can you get me juice? I had surgery." "Nadia, can you change the channel?" "I had surgery." "Dad, can I have ice cream for breakfast?" "I had surgery." Brandon put a deadline on the surgery card, but he was smiling the whole time. The other kids settled back into their routines. Brandon and I were more openly together, holding hands in the kitchen, sharing quick kisses when the kids weren't looking. Though trust me, they were always looking. A couple of weeks later, on a bright Saturday morning in May, Brandon asked me to walk in the garden. The roses were blooming. There was a soft breeze, and the twins' artwork was taped to the back door. I could feel eyes pressing against the upstairs windows. 4 little spies who couldn't mind their business. "They're watching us," I said. Brandon glanced up at 4 heads duck out of sight and laughed. "Let them watch," he said. We walked to the bench under the willow tree. He took both my hands, and suddenly I knew something was happening. My heart started pounding in my ears. "Vanessa," he said, looking right into me these past few months, "with you have been the happiest of my life since Lauren died. You brought light back into this house. You helped my kids heal. You helped me heal. You helped yourself heal too, even if you don't give yourself credit for that. I don't know how long we've technically been a couple," he went on, "but I know this. I can't imagine my life without you in it. I love you. My kids love you. You're already the heart of this family." So, he took a breath, then did something I never thought would happen to me after Derek. He got down on one knee in the grass and pulled a small blue box from his pocket. "Vanessa Wright," he said, voice shaking just enough to be real. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and the mother to my children? Not as our nanny, but as part of our family." I started crying before he even opened the box. The ring was simple, elegant, the diamond catching the sunlight like a tiny star. "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, yes, yes." He slipped the ring on my finger and stood up just as the back door burst open, and all 4 kids came flying out in their pajamas screaming, "Did she say yes?" Trevor launched himself at my legs. "Are you going to be our real mom?" he asked. "If that's okay with you," I said. "It's not just okay. It's perfect," Caleb said. "Can we call you Mom?" Natalie asked, a little shy. My throat closed up. "I would love that," I said. We got married 3 weeks later in that same garden, under that same willow tree. It was a small ceremony. Family, close friends. The shelter worker who'd held my hand that first night when I came in with 2 suitcases and no hope. Rita from the diner came too, crying and cheering like she'd known all along this was where my story was going. The kids all had roles. Caleb stood beside Brandon and held the rings. The twins scattered flower petals like they were auditioning for a movie. Trevor took his ring-bearer job deadly serious, walking slow and focused down the aisle. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" all 4 kids yelled, "We do!" and everyone laughed and cried at the same time. We said our vows, Brandon promising to love me, to choose me every day to be a partner instead of a boss. Me promising to love his children as my own, to honor the love Lauren gave them by continuing it in my own way. When he kissed me and we turned around to face our guests, the kids tackled us in a group hug. "We're a real family now," Trevor announced. "We've always been a real family," I said. This just made it official. Months later, while we were living our chaotic, beautiful new life, Derek sat in some downtown cafe and picked up a newspaper someone had left on the table. On the society page, he saw a photo from our reception. Brandon and me dancing in the garden, the 4 kids gathered around us laughing. The caption called me a devoted mother to Foster's 4 children. A mutual acquaintance told me he crumpled the paper, threw it away, and walked out. Hollow. And that's where I want to leave you with something a little messy, a little uncomfortable. I was called barren, useless, half a woman for 12 years. I was thrown away by a man who decided my worth began and ended in my womb. In the end, I became a mom to 4 incredible kids who chose me just as much as I chose them. I built a life where my value isn't about what my body can or can't do. It's about the love I give, the stability I create, the way I show up every single day. So let me ask you, do you think it's fair that women are still judged by whether they can have biological children? Do you think stepmoms or adoptive moms, or women like me, are less real than birth mothers? If it were you and your partner called you broken because of something you couldn't control, would you stay, or would you walk? And what about Derek? Does he deserve sympathy for realizing too late what he lost? Or did he make his bed, and now he has to lie in it? Is a man allowed to come back after years of emotional abuse and say, "I made a mistake," and get a second chance? I know where I stand, but I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Do you believe biology is what makes a family? Or is it love and choice and showing up in the hard moments? Have you ever been written off as less than because of something you couldn't control? Or have you ever been the second chance in someone else's story? If my story touched something in you, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that being broken is often just the first chapter of a much bigger story. And then tell me your story in the comments. Agree with me, argue with me, spill your heart, because I read everything. And I promise you this, somewhere out there, your story might be the exact thing that helps another person get up off their own frozen bench and believe that their beginning is still ahead of them.